All right, let's just get into it. You spend all this time, all this money, and sometimes something's just not right. It doesn't have that lush, established feel. It feels a bit, well, cheap, and it's usually not one big thing, but a handful of small, easy to fix mistakes. We're going to walk through my garden and I'll point out the 15 things I see most often, the things that can take a garden from looking thrown together to looking like it's been there forever. Honestly, most of these are free to fix. No fancy tools, no big budget, just a change in perspective. Let's start with one of the biggest offenders. You see this everywhere. I'm talking about that cheap black plastic edging. You know the kind it comes in. A roll and you're supposed to stake it in. The problem is it never stays put. Frost heave pushes it up, the more use it to bits and within. A year is a wavy, broken line that just screams I gave up. It cheapens the look of the most beautiful planting bed. The fix, a proper spade-cut edge. This works because it creates a sharp, deep shadow line, a form of negative space that clearly defines the boundary between lawn and bed. This contrast makes the lawn look greener and the planting bed more intentional. It's most effective to create this edge in the spring or fall when the soil is moist and easy to work with. The mistake to avoid is making the trench too shallow. It needs to be at least 4 to 6 inches deep with your vertical cut to effectively stop lawn grass from creeping in. Visible example would be long curving perennial border where that deep, dark soil line perfectly contains the abundance of the plantings, making the entire scene look crisp, professional, and cared for. It's classic technique for a reason. Now for something people think is helping, but is actually hurting, the dreaded volcano mulch. Piling mulch up against the trunk of a tree or the base of a shrub, it looks unnatural for one, but the real damage is happening underneath. That constant moisture against the bark invites rot, disease, and pests. It can literally girdle and kill the tree over time. The proper technique, a mulch donut, works because it mimics how leaf litter falls in a forest away from the immediate trunk. This allows critical airflow, keeping the bark dry and preventing the living cambium layer from suffocating and rotting. This is the correct method for every single tree and shrub, but it's especially critical for young trees or species prone to collar rot. The biggest mistake is not leaving wide enough gap. You must be able to see the root flare where the trunk widens at the soil line. If you can't, pull the mulch and soil back until you can. For perfect example, picture young maple tree where the base of the trunk is clearly visible and 3-inch deep ring of dark mulch begins about 4 inches away, extending out in perfect circle. It protects the roots while letting the trunk breathe. It's slow motion death sentence otherwise. A huge mistake I see is gardeners getting completely obsessed with flowers. They forget that for most of the year, the real workhorse of the garden is foliage. A garden with only fine textured leaves looks messy and undefined. One with only big, bold leaves can feel clunky. The secret to a garden that looks expensive and designed is contrasting foliage. This works because our eyes crave variety. The juxtaposition of different shapes, sizes, and creates visual energy. Bold leaves serve as anchors, while fine textures add softness and motion. This principle is most powerful in shade gardens where flowers are few, but it's effective everywhere. The mistake to avoid is only contrasting size. You also need to contrast shape and finish. For example, pairing big, round, matte leaf like Rogers O with fine, spiky, glossy foliage like an ornamental grass. Fantastic use cases in moist, shady corner. Place the huge paddle-like leaves of hosta summon substance next to the delicate, silvery fronds of Japanese painted fern. The contrast is stunning even when nothing is in bloom. Don't just think about the flowers, think about the leaves. You get a plant, you're excited, and you stick it in an empty spot. Then you get another one and stick it over there. Soon you have what I call a plant polka-dot effect. Lots of lonely individual plants scattered around with bare mulch in between. It looks hesitant and sparse. A professionally designed garden uses drifts and masses of plants. Instead of one kind of flower plant, a group of 5 or 7. This works because it creates a block of color and text that registers as a single impactful statement. It also helps the plants support each other, creates a microclimate, and shades out weeds. This is best for small to medium perennials and grasses. The mistake to avoid is planting in rigid rows or squares. Always use staggered, triangular groupings for a natural look. A great example is a sunny slope where a river of 24 May-night salvia plants creates a stunning visual flow of deep violet, an effect impossible to achieve with scattered individual plants. Most people don't realize that buying 3 smaller plants is often cheaper and more effective than one giant one. It fills in faster and gives you that lush, intentional look. A little bit of garden art can be charming. A star lot, star of it, not so much. When a yard is cluttered with dozens of gazing balls, spinners, metal herons, and little ceramic gnomes, it starts to look like a yard sale. It distracts from the beauty of the plants themselves. The key is to be selective. This works by establishing a clear focal point, which gives the eye a place to rest and makes the surrounding garden feel more organized and serene. Many objects create visual chaos. The best condition for a piece of art is to have negative space around it, placed at a point where paths intersect or at the end of a vista. The mistake to avoid is choosing art that is out of scale for your garden. Tiny statue gets lost and huge one overwhelms. Perfect use case is single weathered stone bird bath placed in small clearing in woodland garden surrounded by ferns. It becomes quiet, contemplative. Destination elevating the entire space instead of cluttering it. Less is definitely more. It lets the garden breathe. This one is simple but so common. You walk through a garden and all you see are the rims of black plastic nursery pots sticking out of the ground, or maybe a collection of them sitting on the patio half dead. It immediately signals work in progress and makes the whole space feel temporary and untidy. If you're going to use pots, invest in a few good ones. This works because high quality containers act as structural architectural elements, adding tech and a sense of permanence. They are part of the design. A practical tip: if you must keep plants in nursery pots, plunge them in a garden bed. This is best for filling temporary gaps left by faded spring bulbs. The mistake is just dropping the nursery pot into a decorative one, leaving a gap at the top. You should always properly plant it with fresh soil. A beautiful example is a patio corner with a curated trio of pots, a tall ceramic one, a medium terracotta one, and a small stone one, each with complementary plantings. The containers themselves are as beautiful as the plants, creating a finished look. Every good garden needs bones. This is the underlying structure that holds everything together, even in the dead of winter. It's the evergreen shrubs, the small trees, the hard-skipping like paths and walls. This works because it provides a permanent framework, making the seasonal ebb and flow of perennials feel like an exciting show within a stable theater. It gives a garden a sense of history and permanence, which is essential in climates with cold winters. The mistake avoid is making the bones too massive for the space, which can feel oppressive. The scale must match the house and yard. A wonderful example is a winter garden scene. The perennials are gone, but a low box with hedge defines the bed. The sculptural branches of a Japanese maple are coated in frost, and a stone path curves gracefully, still leading the eye. The garden feels complete even while dormant. I know this might be controversial, but the quest for a perfect, uniform, weed-free green carpet can sometimes make a yard look sterile and artificial. A lawn that is nothing but a monoculture of one type of grass, heavily treated with chemicals, can look more like a golf course than a living garden. A bit of diversity is a good thing. This works because a mixed species lawn is a more resilient ecosystem. Clover, for example, has deep roots, withstand drought, and fixes nitrogen, fertilizing the grass for free. This approach is best for a garden aiming for a more natural, cottage-like feel. The mistake is not to confuse this with neglect. You still must manage noxious weeds like thistle. The goal is managed biodiversity. A lovely example is a healthy green lawn where, upon closer inspection, you see tiny white clover flowers buzzing with bees and a few charming English daisies along edge. It feels alive and part of the garden, not a separate, sterile entity. Don't just think on one level. A garden that is all ankles to knee height looks flat and uninteresting. You need to draw the eye upwards. This is where vertical elements come in. A simple trellis with a climbing rose, an obelisk covered in clematis, or even a tall, narrow grass like Carl Forster. This works by making the garden a three-dimensional experience, creating rhythm and a sense of enclosure. It's especially crucial in small gardens where you must go, not out. The mistake to avoid is using a flimsy support for a heavy vine. The structure must be sturdy enough for the mature plant. Also, don't block a primary view. As a use case, imagine a small city patio with a sturdy pergola overhead covered in a grapevine. This creates a leafy ceiling, providing shade and a sense of an outdoor room, making the small space feel lush, intimate, and much larger than it is. It's all about creating layers of interest. It's so easy to get seduced by the big, flashy displays at the garden center in May. You buy all these annuals and spring blooming perennials, and for a few weeks, your garden looks incredible. Then July hits, it all fades, and you're left with a green, boring space until the frost. This is the own season wonder. A garden that looks truly established has something interesting happening in every season. This works by creating an evolving story, keeping the garden and aging year-round. It also provides continuous habitat for wildlife. This requires planning what a plant will offer in each season: fall color, winter structure, or spring flowers. The mistake to avoid is trying to have everything happen at once. Instead, plan for few star performers for each season, creating relay race of interest. Great example is border in late fall, where the golden seed heads of switchgrass catch the light winterberry holly, covered in bright red fruit, and the dark forms of coneflower seed heads provide structure and food for birds. It has quiet, profound beauty. This is a classic beginner mistake. You go to the nursery, buy one of everything you like: yellow marigold, purple salvia, red geranium, pink petunia, and plant them all together. The result is chaotic jumble of competing colors that feels jarring to the eye. It's like shouting instead of having conversation. More high-end look comes from limited, harmonious color palette. This works because repeating related colors creates rhythm and unity, which the perceives as calming and sophisticated. It allows the forms and textures of the plants to stand out. You can choose cool palette of blues and purples to make space feel larger, or hot palette of reds and oranges to create energy. The mistake is thinking limited means boring. Purple theme can include dozens of shades from lilac to deep violet. Beautiful example is border using harmonious cool palette, the silvery leaves of lamb's ears, the deep spikes of salvia, and the pure white blooms of Shasta daisies, all weaving together to create serene and elegant composition. Your front door and entryway are the first impression of your home and garden. So often this is the most neglected spot: a pair of sad, half-dead plants in plastic pots, a cracked walkway, and weeds growing in the seams. It sets a tone of neglect. Investing time here works because this spot has the highest impact for the effort. It's a psychological transition from public to private space, and making it beautiful feels welcoming. The best approach is a large with a thriller, filler, and spiller planting. The biggest mistake is using a pot that's too small. It looks out of scale and dries out too quickly. Go big. A perfect example is a large, elegant planter by the door containing a tall, upright grass as the A-thriller, surrounded by mounting coleus as the F-filler, with trailing sweet potato vine as the S-spiller. It's a lush, complete composition that says welcome home and instantly boosts curb appeal. We've all been guilty of this. The petunias in the hanging basket start to look stringy. The pansies from spring are lighty and brown, but we just leave them there. Dead and dying annuals are like leaving dirty dishes on the counter. They just make everything look messy and uncared for. The fix is simple. Be ruthless. This works by editing out visual clutter. A dead plant is a focal point of decay. Removing it restores clean lines and allows healthy plants to shine. Also prevents pests and diseases from overwintering in the dead material. This is most important in high visibility containers and at the front of borders. The mistake to avoid is being sentimental about one last sad flower. The negative impression of the dying plant as a whole is much stronger. A great example is a fall cleanup. Pulling out all the blackened marigolds and zinnias after a frost and covering the bare soil with a clean layer of shredded leaf. It's better to have a clean, empty space than a messy, dying one. It sets you up for a much better start in the spring. That little strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street is often the most abused and forgotten piece of land. The parking strip of sadness. It's often compacted, dry, and full of weeds. Letting this area go to ruin makes the entire front yard look unkempt. But this is a massive opportunity. This works by swapping a plant that hates the conditions, turf grass, with plants that love them. Tough drought-tolerant perennials will thrive in the heat in poor soil with almost no care. The best plants are Mediterranean types like lavender, or tough as nails succulents like sedum. The mistake is planting anything too tall that could block driver's view, or not checking local regulations first. Fantastic example is parking strip converted into tapestry. Round sedums and Russian sage. It's alive with pollinators all summer, requires no mowing, almost no water, and turns neglected eyesore into the most interesting part of the yard, adding immense curb appeal. And finally, a pet peeve of mine: those perfectly round, obviously fake, hollow risen rocks. They're often used to cover up utility boxes or wellheads, but they rarely fool anyone. They have a uniform color and a plastic sheen that just doesn't exist in nature. Nothing screams cheap shortcut more than a fake rock. The alternative: using plants works because living screen integrates the utility into the landscape, effectively making it disappear. Fake rock draws attention to the cover-up. The best plants for this are dense evergreens that provide year-round screen. The crucial mistake to avoid is planting too close to the utility. The workers need access, so leave clear path behind the shrubs. Sophisticated example is green transformer box at the corner of yard, hidden by gentle curve of new garden bed. 3 upright yews are planted few feet in front of it, and lower perennials are laid in front of them. The box is completely invisible, absorbed into lush, living part of the garden.